morning. My name is David Wall Rice, professor of psychology at Morehouse College, lead for the Identity, Art, and Democracy Lab, and chair of Crown Forum. It's my pleasure to welcome thinking giant Professor Michael Eric Dyson of Vanderbilt University to today's Crown Forum conversation. Of course, we're fortunate to count Professor Dyson as part of the Morehouse College family, but we also know him as a voice of activism and accountability for issues of and relating to the African diaspora. At Vanderbilt, Professor Dyson is the Centennial Chair and University Distinguished Professor of African American and Diaspora Studies in the College of Arts and Science, and University Distinguished Professor of Ethics and Society in the Divinity School. Professor Dyson is a prominent commentator across several national media outlets, a contributing opinion writer at the New York Times, contributing editor at the New Republic and at ESPN's The Undefeated. Professor Dyson has written 8 New York Times best-selling books, the most recent being Long Time Coming, Reckoning with Race in America. Professor Dyson, welcome. It's good to see you, brother.
Professor Rice, always great to see you, my man. A man of incredible pedigree and strong inclination to do the right thing and to think the right thing at the right time. So I'm honored to be here today, sir.
Thank you, brother. So I guess, look, we're going through so much, but I guess the beginning, I guess we begin with the title of your book, Reckoning with Race in America. We're on the other side of what I coin an evil administration that's punctuated with insurgents on the U.S. Capitol. I mean, just something that seems mind-blowing to many, but not anything that's particularly surprising. You have a Confederate flag being waved at least outside the U.S. Senate doors. But we have a new administration. So do we still have to reckon with race in America, or are we done? What does all this stuff mean, man?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything you said. And yep, we still got to do it. We had to do it before that. We certainly have to do it after that. Those are the inflection points that are deeply and profoundly disturbing, highly visible. Therefore, they organize around their existence, both the insistence and iteration of racial animus and its opposite, anti-racism, to combat anti-Blackness and anti-Semitism and anti-Arab and anti-Muslim identities and the like. But at the same time, we have to admit that it's the deeply entrenched values, visions, and beliefs that are hostile to our communities that need to be both revealed and addressed. After the death of George Floyd, that was a very powerful inflection point. People saw what was going on. Many white people for the first time fell in love with Black folk, right? No judgment, it is what it is. And so they got the point because all the asterisks were removed. All the factors that would prohibit them from understanding our condition were removed. Oh, he must have been violent. Now he was laying prostrate on the ground. He must have been a threat and a danger. No people. And many white people said enough is enough. They hit the streets. They swelled the protests. They became the largest protests against racial injustice in American history. Why? Because a lot of white people were for the first time involved immediately. And we asked for that. When we talked about allyship is putting your body on the line. And guess what? Many of them did. The 2 men who were killed after the Kenosha, Wisconsin protests against the shooting of Jacob Blake, 2 white men. The young lady, Heather Heyer in Charlottesville, white woman, after those horrible protests by those claiming Jews will not replace us and arguing against Black people and others. So the point is that white people took that seriously, always have, to be honest. James Reeb, the Unitarian minister in the 1960s, beat down. And so we know that that kind of allyship is critical, but it's not just in the streets. It's got to translate to the suites. It's got to translate to schools and corporate structures. So here we are 6, 7, 8 months later, after George Floyd's death, when we said we would reckon. And what happened in the immediate aftermath? The love affair began. The deep passion for Blackness, posting on the, Instagram, and our identification with Black people, our deep and profound and abiding love for them. We're going to change things. Ads will be different. Monies will flow, freely to Black people. We are checking out what we're doing. Certain people got fired for doing racially insensitive things and the like. Here we are later, not a peep. Can't figure it
Mm.
out. Did it really happen? Did we fall in love? Well, you can be cynical or even skeptical or legitimately critical. But what I think is that we've gone to a new phase. It's the unsexy part. When you fall in
Hmm.
love, you got candles and flowers and music. And then, when you're into it, who's taking the kids to practice? Um, did you really put the toilet paper on the inside and not the outside so it could roll? Are you actually rolling the toothpaste from the top and not the bottom? And by the way, sir, you left the toilet seat up and I almost fell in and went fishing. So those are the everyday factors that figure out how love, the unsexy part of love, is communicated. But the more substantive, deeply abiding elements of love are communicated. And I think we're at that period now. What do we do? This is the unsexy part. Behind the scenes, ain't no protests. So what do you do at your corporate structure? What do you do at your job? What do you do at home? How do you tell grandma? That's not really the word to use about Black people, Granny. How do you talk about Puerto Rican and his Latino people, Latinx folk? How do you talk about this stuff in ways that make a difference? How do you make your curricula change so that it reflects the deep and profound commitments and contributions of other peoples? So that's where we are right now, trying to figure all that stuff out. So this is what the real reckoning is about, the real
Mm.
readjustment. If it's a microaggression, it has to be a micro resistance. It's the
Hmm.
guerrilla combat on the ground trying to figure out how to make these things different. So, yeah, we need the reckoning after the orange apparition has been dismissed. But the forces that created the necessity of and desire for that orange apparition are still here. Senator Hawley still has his job. Senator Rubio still has his job. Senator Cruz still has his job. Senator Graham still has his job. Senator McConnell still has his job. And even though some of them at the end tried to pretend, or my daddy used to say, make like they weren't part of the problem, they were. So this is the more subtle reinforcement of the proxies and privileges of white supremacy and white nationalism and white innocence and white comfort that have to be acknowledged and addressed. So yeah, the work is just now really beginning.
So that sounds like, I mean, and it's so much. And how do we confront that? And I want to, the sermon to white America, I love that.
Right.
So there are some things that white folk need to do. There is accountability that they have to assume.
Absolutely.
Um, and there's some hope that we always have, especially if we lean into or in some way familiar with Black liberation theology. We can appreciate as people who are Black folk as there is hope in the unseen. There is a future, but these past 4 years, and I'm coming to you as a mentor, right, at your knee, as it were. The thing that was so amazing wasn't the person who was occupying the position of president for these past 4 years. It's the folks who enabled him
Yep.
almost unilaterally to do these things that was so mind blowing. Again, it shouldn't be surprising, but it was profoundly disappointing and heart wrenching. So how do we deal with that? We've got to deal with that, folks who are still there, who are still enabling white supremacy, white nationalism, just whiteness, unabated at the detriment and compromise of people of color, right? And looking at kind of these hegemonic norms and things like that. How do we do all of this work to be done at one time? It just seems like so much.
It is so much. You're absolutely right. And yes, Tears We Cannot Stop, a sermon to white America. I talked about the responsibilities that white folk have. A bit of that again in Long Time Coming, a reckoning with race in America, because it ain't a Negro problem, it's a white problem. It's not an African problem in America. It's not Black people's problem. It's not people of color's problem. It's not BIPOC problems. Is white folk who continue to adhere to beliefs that, in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary, Their beliefs are not right, are not supported by evidence. And when they are, it's manipulated. It's scientific evidence rerouted through the prism, to mix metaphors, of a white supremacist outlook that already is looking for a justification for its already established conclusion that Black people are inferior and therefore in need of help or displacement, or sometimes extermination and eradication, or sometimes certainly in terms of enslavement. We look at the history of our presence in this nation, at least in North America since 1619, as a kind of totemic year there. So yeah, it's a bunch. But even after you win the championship in the NBA, you got to start the next season. Dang, we got to start right back. People competing again. So even when you win the championship of recognition of anti-Blackness as established in the culture, you got to start a new season of reflection. And you're right back there where newer teams that didn't appear before are now taking a shot at your crown, or trying to no pun intended with crown trying to displace you, trying to challenge you. And you got to come up with new justifications, new evidence, new arguments, keep you on your toes, fresh. So yeah, in one sense, man, it's a bunch, but there's been a bunch of work done. There's a lot of stuff that's been done, the stuff that's being done. We can't keep up with everything. So that's why we need a team. We need other people weighing in, thinking critically, holding us to account, even as we hold the larger society to account. Oh, our own blinders in regard to trans people have to be removed, even as we argue for Black people who are also trans, or who are also gay or lesbian or bisexual, who are also poor, who are also women, who are also victims of misogynoir, even as we remonstrate morally against white supremacy. It's all mixed in and messed up. But the beautiful thing is that we gather together in intersectional analysis, the interconnection of various forms and streams of both consciousness and of consideration and of theory and of understanding of the world. And it gives us a nuanced, complicated, complex view of the Blackness that we claim to represent, which we do, whether we want to or not. Somebody sees us, whether or not we claim to have a certain banner of Blackness hanging above our head, we certainly will be treated like what we are perceived to be.
That's right.
So it's not merely subjective. It has an objective characteristic that transcends our intent or desire. But it's a lot, it's a bunch, and it's also too much to ask us. But what did the great British Nigerian philosopher Helen Fuller Sade Adu say? I gave you all the love I got. I gave you more than I could give. What? I gave you more than I could give. I didn't even think I could give that. And I gave it to you. Everything I didn't think I had, I gave to you. Everything I thought I had, I gave to you. So we got to be on the Sade tip. I got to give you everything I got. I got to give you more than I think you could give. That's where hope and faith come in. That's where Elijah, with the widow who's got the meal in the cabinet saying, I ain't got but a little bit. And then she kept, it kept getting filled up. I thought I gave you everything I had. I gave you the last I got, and God keeps replenishing it. So the reason, Sade could keep giving you what she didn't have is because it wasn't hers to give. It was an eternal source. It was a transcendent one. I don't mean to get all loosey-goosey or mysterious for y'all, but I'm saying at the end of the day, you got to keep digging, keep excavating, keep thinking, keep broadening the parameters of your consciousness and the horizon of your belief to tap into what Howard Thurman, the great man from Morehouse as well, talked about as either you're going to be a prisoner of the event you confront, or you're going to be a prisoner of hope. Because if you're a prisoner of the event, the horizon of your possibility is limited to what you see. But if you're a prisoner of hope, he said, our slave foreparents faced long rows of cotton and the rawhide whip of the overseer, but they imagined and conjured a different world. And that's what we must do. Call upon the resources of our people to gin up the faith and the resistance in the face of extraordinary odds against us to keep on going. It's not always, logically explainable, but it's something that we've called on to be able to keep moving forward.
So can you talk to me? I love that, this being a prisoner of hope and innovation and imagination. And you have so beautifully throughout your career made sure that you tapped into the secular as well as the sacred, right?
That's right.
As you're looking at Marvin Gaye, that was just this great juxtaposition of the two and kind of a clear articulation there. But we know that you've written books about Jay-Z, about with Nas, deconstructing Illmatic. You've looked at, Tupac. You have, friends with Prince, knew Michael Jackson. Can you talk about why it's so important to be within that popular cultural space of imagination and innovation? This most recent book, Long Time Coming, you dedicated to LeBron James. Can you
Right.
talk about why it's important to underline and amplify those figures within your scholarship? Because it seems like, a lot of people can just be like, ah, man, he is playing loosey goosey with all this stuff. He's quoting most Def lyrics and all this kind of stuff. But why is that important? And why is that an important tool that you've been able to use? And what does it do for us? What does it do for the Black imagination?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I've withstood the critiques from the very beginning, and I get that. Because when I started out and wasn't a whole bunch of people trying to talk about hip hop back then, especially no scholars of some epiphenomenal, ephemeral, passing, form of culture that some young, poor Black people and some Latinx folk generated out of the Bronx that we don't even know in 10 years will even exist. And some of the greats in Black culture now, I don't like it. And what is that? And turn that noise down, kid, and get off my lawn, kind of approach
Sure.
to what now is the highest grossing musical art form, having overtaken country music not long ago. So you're talking about going from that to that. And I was on that train from the very beginning, not uncritically, because I'm trying to shoot back at the misogyny, the sexism, the homophobia, the uncritical valorization of material wealth and so on, but also seeing its genius. Same way I do the Black church from the get-go. A lot of bad stuff going on in the Black church, much more great stuff going on in the Black church. It ain't perfect. The Black church that's beaten up on the secular culture has some of its secular sins internalized within its own infrastructure. But that's what it is, because we're hybrids, right? We're amphibious. We're both in land of strong truth and in the sea, struggling against our own sin or our own inequities or our own limited visions. So the point is that for me, the sacred and secular at the end of the day doesn't make much sense, because if God gave it to you, it's great, whether it's Prince or whether it's James Cleveland. And if God ain't gave it to you, it ain't gonna make no difference, whether it's secular or sacred. Oh my God, you mean some sacred music ain't given by God? Look, I'm just saying that is God behind everything people say in the church? Jesus will never say no. Stop lying, bruh. He told you no this morning. Lord, no. May I? Hell no. Okay, that was me. That wasn't the Lord. So thing is, Doc, if God is giving it to you, Marvin Gaye's romantic inclinations embody the virtue of an ideal relationship with another human being. Now, I ain't saying there ain't no funky stuff up in there, some, pornographic and, highly contested vision. Of course, we got resistance to that, but you ain't got to go to church to say that's problematic. Feminists will tell you the same thing. There are some sex positive feminists who embrace pornography and some who are highly critical of the sex workers' subordination to a masculinist and patriarchal conception of the world. I mean, so it's a complicated intermixing. Church don't want to talk about it, don't want to talk about sex, while the issues of sexual identity and sexuality proliferate in our communities and hurt and harm us. So from the get-go, I believe that it's got to be mixed up in the best sense of that word. And so, yeah, a lot of people say, well, why are you using these? Why are you talking about these people? You got a PhD from Princeton and you're spending time talking about some darn rappers or R&B singers, or you're spending time writing books on folk. Well, I've written books about, highly intellectual ideas. I've talked about philosophical conceptions of social construction of race. I've talked about Foucaultian conceptions of insurrection and subjugated knowledges. I speak about German and, French theorists. I talk about the highest theoretical density in African American culture. I talk about Stuart Hall and his conceptions of culture. So I'm doing all the
Mhm,
egghead stuff and all the good nerdy
mhm,
stuff that I love, but I'm
mhm,
trying to relate it to what's going on in these streets out here because that's where I came from. I didn't get no PhD to please other scholars. Sorry to
mhm,
hurt your feelings. Sorry to make you upset, people, because you weren't there when I was trying to struggle to become who I was. Some of the
mhm,
theories you have were used against me and projected against my body to suggest I wasn't going to survive and do what I had to do in order to get a PhD from Princeton to go on to become a distinguished professor and a famous and celebrity oriented, like whatever. That right? You didn't even see that. So why you ain't got the right then? You have the right, of course, and the privilege to do so, but it don't make me no never mind. Because what I'm about is bringing rigor and insight, highly critical consciousness to bear upon popular forms and expressions to leverage the highest intellectual pedigree I have in defense of noble aspirations and in criticism of destructive ones. And so that means across the board, it's going to be sacred. And as Black people say, circular, sacred, circular, and the secular stuff. And to raise questions about the division of that artificially, anyhow, and to talk about what it might mean. That's why James Cole talked about, the blues and the spirituals, because
mhm,
them
mhm,
things got some interesting and important insight for us to have. Bobby Blue Bland and Yolanda Adams, right? We need to listen to the insight and the courage, the limitations and the powers that these realms bring to bear. So, yeah, it ain't that I'm being loosey goosey, I'm being rigorous about it, but in a discipline that, people who don't acknowledge it may not understand or desire. And I get it, I'm not mad. What I eat don't make you crap. And if you don't like it, turn the channel, don't read the book. But I'm trying to invest in and engage in dialogue with, realms of our culture that have been artificially divided and that when brought together have something interesting to say. And I wear a bunch of hats. Sunday before last, I'm preaching at the National Cathedral. And then
mhm,
on another day, I'm talking to David, my man from Morehouse. On another day, a brilliant young professor doing this thing. Me and Michael and David chopping it up. Then on another day, I'm on a radio program talking about hip hop. On another day, I'm talking with Peggy McIntosh about whiteness. On another day, I'm speaking to William Barber about the prophetic gospel. I'm hanging out with Freddie Haynes talking about the iteration of prophetic resistance to social injustice. And another day, I'm talking to Tamika Mallory about Cardi B and Angela Davis. That's what I do. I'm living that intersectional existence and it makes people nervous, and I get it. But we have to bring the full weight and authority of our various strands and commitments to bear to talk about what it is that we are and who we are, because we are all that together and a bunch more. So, it's my calling to do that. Other people's callings are different, and I respect that. It's not a judgment, and it's not an either or. We need both and a whole bunch more. We need, quote, private intellectuals who don't do nothing on TV, who spend all their time in their studies, but they generate information that people who hit the streets can take there and derive some meaning from and apply. Everybody's got their position. Play your position. Stay in your lane. If you got multiple lanes, do it. If you lane switching and code switching, do that. Some people stuck in one lane and it's a brilliant lane. Some people got multiple lanes and they can multiply and navigate those lanes. Some people drive helicopters, some people in planes, some people on, submarines. Do your thing, use your vehicle, do what it is. But don't be mad if I can get in the submarine and the airplane and try to do what I do. Oh, let me do it like let me hold on. Let me get to Obama. It's what I do.
So Doc, tell me this. You and you've kind of suggested this. Why do you do what you do? Because I think that a lot of folks might not see where you've come from. And I think one of the things that's so beautiful is the story that you've been vulnerable enough to share with us in terms of your path and your brother's past, who God bless has passed recently. But
Mhm.
I think that you're highlighting and underscoring where it is you come from really uh, could give people a map as to why it is you're out here doing all of these things, right? Can you
Right.
talk to us about why, where you talk about being a single father and raising, going to graduate school and doing things like that. Can you talk to us a little bit about where you've come from? Because I think that it's so easy for folks to just say, this is the guy who has all these 8 New York Times bestsellers and he's hanging out. I think that's easy to do, but I really would like for these young men who are watching this and other people who are watching this to kind of get a sense of your genesis.
Yes, sir. Well, I started at the bottom. Now I'm here. I mean, poor black kid, working class in Detroit, Michigan, father, who didn't go to college, mama who didn't get a chance to go to college, although my mama was brilliant and, was denied an opportunity. She's now what, 82, 83 years old, but, people didn't think that women with her kind of intellectual rigor should go to school in a certain way. So, I came from, people who experienced denial of opportunity from the Jim Crow South, daddy from Georgia, mama from Alabama, up South in Detroit. Daddy got laid off. We were struggling against the odds. He refused to go on welfare. We started a grass cutting and siding business. My brother begins after my father dies, goes to the Marines, drops out, starts hustling, starts selling drugs, marijuana, crack, doing his thing. I'm cussing him out every day, using words that ain't in the Bible. We come from difficult circumstances and situations. He's in the pen. I'm a professor at Penn. That's what it was. And so, yeah, I've seen the utter underside of the struggle. I've seen the underbelly of hurt and pain and what can happen when you are poor and black in this culture and what that might mean, and the hurt and pain and trauma that people have to endure, and what we have to do in order to seek relief from that misery, and the uses of the culture we make, and the strides we take in order to overcome the odds. So yeah, I mean, that's where I come from. That's what informs me. That's what pushes me. The death of my brother in prison, having been convicted for murdering a man we think he was innocent. But look, the people who he was accused of murdering, the man who was accused of murdering, think he was guilty. So, I've dealt with both ends of that, resisting the criminal justice system, and at the same time having a brother who we believe was a victim of an unjust verdict. And yet black juries sent him to prison. It wasn't no white folk. And the particular brand and variety from which I hail happens to be rooted in and deeply entrenched in the everyday working class, poor black existence and the worldview that was shaped there. There's not just one, there are multiple ones. There are people who are selling drugs. There are people who are social activists. They coming from the same hood. All that's real black, what it means to be authentically black. I've been arguing against narrow conceptions of blackness from the beginning. I ain't going to give into it now. I'm not going to capitulate to somebody because they are a scholar and uncomfortable with my, thinking and my engagement in the world, that they're going to define me out of what it means to be a scholar, define me out of being a public intellectual, define me out of being a preacher, define me out of being a real black man, define me out of being a minister. I am who I am. I is who I is. I do what I does. And so my reality derives from that. That's why I take that into the world. I'm a Trojan horse. I get in because I'm a light-skinned, curly-haired, glass-wearing Negro, and playing to the colorism of both black people and the iconic, ironic, worship of the whiteness in me from the dominant culture that sees my lighter skin as a pedigree above. And then I'm coming in to challenge it. I'm coming in to subvert it. So I'm bringing all the other black people inside of me because I'm a Trojan horse. And when I get in, I let them all out. All the people that they thought, how did they get in here? They got in with me. I had a plus for 40 million with me when I came to the party, plus 40 million, or the ones who recognize, or the ones who roll with me, or the ones who say, when some black people say, who made you leave? Who you speak for? I speak for people who say I speak for them. That's who I speak for. And if I don't speak for you, I don't speak for you. And I ain't mad about that, because everybody got somebody that they either speak for or speak against or speak with, or don't nobody speak for them and they ain't got a handle lead. I'm down with all that. Love you. But I am here for those who see in my life a trajectory, a path, a tradition and a way to open up new possibilities so that they can do stuff that's quite different than what I do. You ain't got to be like me in order to like me and to see what I'm doing as a way to do what you do. So all that is informing who I am, the 23 books I done wrote and the books I continue to write. And the new book I got coming up later this year is really about, engaging race, entertaining race, and performing blackness and what that might mean. So look out for that in November. I come back to the Crown Forum with my man and we can hang out again.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and I want to thank you so much. I have one last question.
Yes, sir.
And as we're talking about, and again, framing it within long time coming reckoning with race in America.
Right.
What is it that you would charge the Morehouse College student to do now in this reckoning? What should they be wrestling with or portending as they get ready to go out into the world and make their imprint?
Yes, sir. That's a great question. Look, I hold Morehouse in high regard, the greatest Black person in the history of this world to me, and the greatest American who ever lived. Martin Luther King Jr. came out of there. That's just my bias. That's my belief. That's my understanding of the world. Jesus King. That's how I'm rolling. That's what I do. That's what I think. So, for me, that pedigree, that tradition, that heritage is extraordinary. Look at what that college has produced. Look at what Morehouse has produced. Look at you being there as a brilliant intellectual light who remains loyal to the landscape. Look at a Raphael Warnock, who is now the first Black male senator, first Black senator from Georgia and from the South, deep South there in the chambers, and pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church. Look at Michael Walren, a minister, a great minister in, where is he? In New York. Look at Mark Lamont Hill. Was a great young intellectual that I, unbeknownst to me, heard me in the Crown Forum and determined he wanted to do what he does as a result of that. God bless him. And so many other men, Otis Moss III, on and on and on, Maynard Jackson, the list of those accomplished Black men who have been incredibly important. So the thing I think that is important for young Black men at Morehouse to do is to continue to be self-critical through the prism of self-reflection, to open up greater horizons of social justice and resistance generated by the principles of love and fairness that you inherit from that great institution. So if Dr. King said injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, that means you can't nurse your pet peeves. Oh, I'm fighting against racial injustice over here, but I still don't dig, women in church saying they thing. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. You can't maintain racial justice while reproducing the pathology of misogyny and sexual injustice or gender injustice. It ain't gonna work. So the thing is to continue to learn as much as you can where you are. Everything ain't gonna be immediately relevant or obvious to you why you should learn it. But if you learn it well, you're gonna learn to think. And if you think well, that's the best thing you can take with you. Most of the stuff you learn by the time you graduate is gonna be obsolete. But what won't be obsolete is a way of thinking, an approach, a critical understanding of the world, so that even when they got new information, you still have a methodological approach, a system, a scheme of comprehension that allows you to integrate information quickly, disseminate knowledge efficiently, and broaden the horizon of opportunity for your people. That's what I think young Morehouse men should do. Do the best job you can, learn as much as you can, think as critically as you can, so when you go into the world, you carry with you the visions and virtues of that institution where a Lawrence Carter continues to reign as one of the most legendary and inspiring figures ever to emerge within Black institutions of higher education. That's what y'all should do. And with your great president, who is there right now, you should continue to mobilize and motivate and engage in serious reflection, critical analysis, so that at the end of the day, the spirits of our people will be ennobled. The aspirations we have nurtured from the very beginning of overcoming odds will be contributed to, and you will take your place as one link in a great chain of Black being that continues to transform the world in which we live.
Professor Dyson, I want to thank you so very much for joining us. I want to thank Cedric Hughes, who's the manager of our bookstore, for ensuring that this happened here today. And I want to take a personal note to say I've known you since I was in high school, since my mother introduced the two of us in Dallas, Texas. But you were generous enough to me when I graduated from Morehouse College, when I started writing for the Washington Post and Vibe magazine. You let me come to your class at Columbia University, and it was Selwyn, Seyfu Hines, and myself. Selwyn was the source at the time. And you let me say some words. And that's the first time I felt like maybe I could be a college professor. So I want to thank you so much for being by me for all these years, for being so such a tremendous example for all of us. And I just want to tell you, I love you, brother. I appreciate you, and Godspeed and God grace to you.
Love you right back. David Wall Rice, one of the greatest younger intellectuals we have in this country, one of the greatest, most exemplary professors we have, and the integrity, even in your name and the choice you made to identify and to be a radical feminist at the level of nomenclature, but also in terms of principle, is one more feather in that tremendous cap you have, and that crown on the Crown Forum that you continue to give to us. Thank you so much for this great opportunity, young man.
Thank you, brother.
Dear old Morehouse, dear old Morehouse, we have pledged our